All right, the third step. These are the 5 pitfalls of overthinking. And I'm going to give you a clue. We're going to go through the 5 pitfalls. Each one of them is underpinned by the same thing. Why am I feeling uncomfortable? It's the secret weapon in all of them. All right, here we go. These are the 5 pitfalls. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to briefly explain each one of them. When it comes up, if it resonates with you or it reminds you of someone you know, I want you to say, oh yeah. And then what I'm going to do is each one of them, I'm going to give you 2 questions at the end. One question is cognitive. So it will appeal to the cognitive part of your brain. The other is intuitive. So for those of you who are just not digging this whole intuitive thing, you can stick with the cognitive piece. It's not as powerful, but at least you have that option. Okay, so here we go. The first pitfall of overthinking is an over-reliance on rules, processes, and procedures. Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Now, all of us work within some boundaries. I've spent the most of my career in government. Our big box is drawn by laws and regulations. I was interviewing Jeff Pagnotti. Some of you may know Jeff. He's the executive director for the Federal Highway Administration. I've worked with him for years. And Jeff said to me, he said, I tell our people all the time, you have to know the big box that you're in. And you have to take care not to draw a little box inside the big box. I was working as the director of the Office of Transportation Operations for Federal Highway Administration, working for Jeff. In that office, I had several responsibilities, one of which was managing the manual on uniform traffic control devices. Woo-hoo, yeah. You're thinking, wow, some people have all the luck. Yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. I hadn't been there long, and the team leader came to me and said, listen, Shelley, we're trying to update the manual. We've been doing this for 2 years, and we just don't have the staff resources to make all the changes and deal with all the comments. Can you get us more staff? What do you think? I said, I think the staff, what was that? Oh, yeah. I said, I think the staff resources thing is going to be a kind of a dead end, but I might be able to get some budget. How about if we look at hiring some contractors to help with updating the manual? Oh, no, we can't do that. Why can't we do that? Oh, no, the lawyer says we can't. Any lawyers here? Yeah. No, lawyers, really? Wow. Oh, there we go. There we go. Yeah, we blame everything, of course, right on the lawyers. Yeah, you knew. I said, well, okay, so the lawyers apparently said that because this would be a regulatory action that you couldn't use contract support. I said, okay, well, why don't you go back and talk to the lawyers and let's really clearly understand the regulatory framework. Let's really understand the big box and then see what we've got. They came back 2 days later and said, we'll take that contract support. They had drawn a little box inside the big box. They got the METCD out the next year, and they've used contract support ever since. So here's your question. When you get stuck here, are you drawing a little box inside the big box? Here's the intuitive question. Do you consciously know your values and principles? I heard this from all the leaders I interviewed. When you're working inside the big box, there's a lot more latitude than you think there is. Decisions, choices are guided by the values that you hold, the principles that you live by, those feelings about how you spend your time, what's important to you, those are important in making a decision and handling a situation inside the big box. Do you know your values that come into play? All right, the second one, second pitfall, overly narrow focus. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Overly narrow focus. This is when you have a big situation and you focus. We just take all that stuff and we're going to strip it away and just focus. Now, in Texas, where I grew up, we say it's like a duck on a June bug. Y'all have that here? Like a duck on a June bug. Yeah. So when you're overly narrowly focusing, you're looking down and in. I interviewed Peter Sweatman. Peter is the head of the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute. Peter's from Australia. And Peter said in Australia, there's a lot of mining companies. And so they'll go in and they'll dig a mine and start tunneling. And then another company go right next door, dig a mine and start tunneling, and nobody knows what's going on inside the tunnels, and they don't coordinate. He said, sometimes my researchers can be a little like that. He said, my job is to climb out of the tunnels and look up and out. Look up and out to see the context. To see the context. So that's your first question. Are you seeing the context of the situation that you're dealing with? Now here's the problem with seeing the context. When you look up and out and you see the context, that's when you see the sticky, icky, prickly stuff that's out there in the context. I know I've said, and I've had colleagues who've said, we could make the right decision if we just didn't have to deal with that politics. Oh yeah? Any oh yes? Yeah, right? Because see, that is what makes it complex. It takes something that we can focus on, we can get our head around, but then it makes it complex, and that gets us out of the comfort zone. Are you focused on what you're comfortable on? Just what you're comfortable on. And we're going to see in the next one why your brain is wired to do that. So here's the next one, the third one, overly protective thinking. This is where you fall in love with your idea. Oh, nobody wants to admit to that one. You fall in love with your idea. See, there's a reason for this. You are wired to see what you already believe. You're wired to see what you already believe. Here's what's happening in your brain. The brain is made up of neurons. A neuron has an axon. It connects to the nucleus. On the other end are all these little dendrites. And each dendrite ends in the axon of an adjacent neuron. And that gap, that's where the synapse happens. So an electrical pulse comes down that neuron, it gets to the gap, it jumps over the gap into this one. So you've got electrical pulses flowing through your brain. Just flowing right through the brain. Well, here's the thing. The neurons that fire together wire together. Right? The neurons that fire together wire together. You have little tracks in your brain, and that's these pathways. The more you use it, the more reinforced it becomes. Everybody here is an expert in something. There's something that you have developed over years of experience. There's something that you like to do, and you do it over and over again. When you do that, it makes that little path in your brain a superhighway. A superhighway. Here's the thing about thoughts that get on the superhighway. These are fast. They're quick. They take no energy. Remember this one up here is slow, takes a lot of energy? These, man, fast, easy, quick. So when something resonates with you, you are wired to see what you already believe. Here's the other part of this one. This one can go kind of to a difficult place. There's something that happens, and we all have this, by the way, where you get something going on, you've got neurons that are fired together and wired together, and you've got a superhighway, but something happens. We wire neurons together three ways. One is through persistent practice. Two is through intense emotional experience. And three is through attentional focus. Intentional focus. Now, sometimes they get so wired together, they actually fuse together. This is when your idea becomes you. It's not just an idea, it is you. Your idea is part of your self-esteem. And those neurons, they are fused together. And anytime that happens, if something threatens that, then we have a trigger and we overreact. I want to share two stories with you. I grew up in Central Texas in a little town. My grandparents lived on a farm just a little ways outside of town. And it was a really great day when I got to make cinnamon rolls with my grandmother. She'd let me help. We'd make up the dough, let it rise, knead it out, roll it out, put some butter on it, some brown sugar, some cinnamon, slice it into slices, put it in the oven, let it bake. I was in the airport, smelled it before I saw it. Cinnamon. All that happened is I smelled the scent of cinnamon. That's all that happened, really. But here's what else happened, somatic markers. I began to feel all warm inside. I began to smile as I remembered my grandmother and all the love she baked in those cinnamon rolls. By the time I got to the gate, I was back in Texas. How y'all? I'm good. You good? I'm good. That is the anatomy of a trigger. It is something small that triggers a bodily response, an emotional response, and a behavioral response. Second story. I was brand new in my job as the ITS Joint Program Office Director. Now, one thing you need to know about me, I have a superhighway that's wired into my brain, and it's not a particularly productive one all the time. It's about success and what I have become to believe that it is, not exactly productive. I'll spare you the psychoanalysis. Just trust me. So I'm brand new in my job, and I am determined I am going to be a success. I get a call from my boss, and he says, "Hey, Shelley, what can you tell me about this paperwork for one of your employees requesting a year-long transfer to another agency?" I can't tell you anything about it. It's the first I've heard of it. I said, "Okay, that's fine. I thought that might be the case. I'm going to send the paperwork back down. You figure it out. Let me know if you want me to do something." Fine. No big deal. Then he said, "And by the way, I want you to know that my expectation is that your staff understand that you're the director and they need to come to you for these kinds of things." Reasonable. And that's about the way the tone of the conversation was. My brain didn't hear it that way. And I didn't understand my somatic markers at the time. It hit that superhighway that threatened my success. Call that staff person in. I'm telling myself, "Oh, I'm good at this. I can handle this." They start explaining to me about what was going on. I began to feel the anxiety and the knot in my stomach. The heat began to build in my body. My jaw began to clench. And I erupted. It remains one of the worst memories of my career. It was a trigger. You have triggers. You need to know what they are. You identify them by an overreaction, and you need to unwind them to understand what they are. So that's your second question. Are you overreacting because of some trigger that you're holding on too tight to?